Puzzles are a large part of games from plenty of different genres, but I think it takes something really special to extrapolate that puzzle-solving aspect into a full game without making it feel insubstantial or worse, boring. If games like The Witness and Portal are anything to go by, the best puzzle games take deceptively simple concepts and drill down on them, and Superliminal certainly follows suit, but manages to fall just short of excellence. Where The Witness focuses on line mazes and Portal has its, well, portals, Superliminal is a game all about perspective. Its puzzles all have this optical illusion-like quality to them, for the most part requiring you to use forced perspective to manipulate the scale of objects, especially in the early game. Basically, there are a handful of items in each area that you can interact with, and you can do this from pretty much any distance. Once you pick up an object, you can drop it anywhere in the environment, and its size will shift to work within that new perspective. You pick up an object that's far away and drop it closer, you'll make it shrink. You pick up a nearby object and drop it in the distance, you'll make it grow. Simple. This forced perspective gimmick is super weird to describe, but in practice it's honestly pretty straightforward. Once it sinks in that you can pick up and drop items at any distance, the mechanic just kind of works how you expect it to. It certainly helps that Superliminal's earliest puzzle rooms make sure you understand the ins and outs of this core mechanic before moving on to anything weirder, because it's one that persists throughout the game, receiving minor tweaks here and there. For instance, one zone lets you duplicate objects rather than picking them up, but the area the duplicate shows up in is relative to your position. Later areas introduce more illusion-esque elements into the mix, and they mostly revolve around using floor and wall designs to obscure objects or paths. The most obvious example of this is found in one of the darker zones, where Superliminal uses heavy shadows to disguise gaps in the floors and walls, requiring you to interact with light-emitting objects in the environment to reveal its secrets. Other areas include 2D wall art that, when viewed from a specific angle, can be seen as a complete 3D object that you literally just pluck off the wall and use. These illusionary mechanics are Superliminal's bread and butter, and they get implemented in some really interesting and trippy ways. Every time I thought I'd seen everything that the game had to offer, it would throw something at me out of left field, like model houses that you can make giant and walk inside, or floors that only exist as long as something is sitting on top of them. The game even throws adjustable doors at you, allowing you to shrink or grow in accordance with the size of the door that you exit from. These mechanics all sound complex and overwhelming, but they never feel complicated in practice. Despite the reality-shifting nature of these puzzle elements, Superliminal's mechanics are surprisingly intuitive, so long as you can wrap your head around the game's dreamlike logic. This use of dream logic stems from Superliminal's story, which serves as a decent framing device for the game's mind-bending puzzles, if nothing else. Your character is a participant in a dream therapy program that goes horribly wrong, trapping them in a recurring dream cycle with little clear communication with the waking world, and it's up to you to take control of your dreams, escape the cycle, and wake up. As I mentioned, Superliminal's narrative gets the job done as far as framing the game's weird puzzle-based gameplay, but it doesn't really stand out at all. Ultimately, that's fine, since I was here for the puzzles and wasn't even expecting the game to have a story to begin with, but Superliminal definitely feels like it's trying to emulate Portal's dry wit in places with varied success, going so far as to have an emotionless AI commenting on your early progress and situation. That tongue-in-cheek quality eventually gives way to a sincere discussion on the power of perspective, which leaves the game's writing feeling a little unfocused if well-meaning. This late-game shift toward philosophical lecturing is delivered through the character of Dr. Glenn Pierce, who initially tries to help you escape your dream prison, and I think it's his delivery that keeps the latter half of the game from feeling super pretentious. His voice is just really calm and relaxing, which fits perfectly with the later, less grounded areas of the game. Speaking of, I really do enjoy the environments of Superliminal, from the clean, flat colors of the hotel hallways found in the early game, to the full-on brain-busting illusions of the final zone. It is worth noting, however, that some of these illusion-heavy visuals can be pretty hard to look at, with lots of flashing or fast-moving shapes and colors that could be harmful to folks who suffer from photosensitive epilepsy. As someone who doesn't suffer from any photosensitivity issues, even I felt a little overwhelmed by some of the game's later visual tricks, but to Superliminal's credit, it does ramp that intensity up slowly. And I do like that the slow turn from grounded environments to an all-out optical illusion extravaganza is reflected through the game's use of music as well. The lounge-style piano tracks found in the hotel lobbies of the early game help Superliminal feel super casual, but the atmosphere changes almost instantly as you leave that classy facade and enter the more utilitarian backrooms of the dreamscape. The game's atmosphere really shines during levels that focus on the use of shadow, making for a near horror game level of tension as you explore red-spattered corridors accompanied by the buzz of flickering lights and the creaking of doors. And then you go to Crazy Illusion Town and the game's soundtrack becomes much more ethereal, featuring light choral arrangements interspersed with a lone piano note here or there. Overall, Superliminal is an enjoyable experience from start to finish, but it isn't without some issues, chief among these being the actual runtime from start to finish. Now, I'm firmly of the belief that a short game that leaves me wanting more is better than a long game that gets boring before the end, but at just under 2 hours, Superliminal feels way too short, even for me. The game offers in-game achievements to stretch out that experience, but unlocking these doesn't really offer much beyond personal satisfaction. My other main issue is the game's frame rate, which can honestly get pretty choppy at times. I played Superliminal on the Nintendo Switch, so it may run more consistently on other platforms, but my playthrough was plagued by constant hitching for no apparent reason. These frame drops aren't so pervasive that they ruined my time with the game, but it was certainly annoying. With that said, Superliminal is good. With some of the most clever and unique puzzles that I've seen in years, Superliminal is certainly approaching the level of genre titans like Portal and The Witness, but it's held back by a woeful runtime and an inconsistent frame rate, while its story is just kinda there. With that in mind, the puzzle elements that help it stand out are so intuitive and clever, and combined with Superliminal's atmospheric visuals and sound design, it makes for a puzzle game worth checking out for yourself. Superliminal has been out for PC for a year now, but has just been released for PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch.